Mic check 1 2. It's the Y2K collector, and in 2025 I still have a brand new sealed PlayStation 4. And there's a reason for this, and I kind of want to go over it with the Y2K crew this morning. Now, most of you know that I stopped collecting for the PlayStation 4 a while ago. And it was for a number of reasons. It was really for kind of the same reason why I stopped collecting for the Switch at the time. Both consoles are great consoles to collect for. However, the PS4, kind of like the Switch, was starting to feel like a little bit of a black hole in that there were so many amazing titles and so many games for me to get, that I felt like it was just too much for me to try to collect for the PS4, the Switch, and collect for retro games. And so I kind of wanted to just narrow my focus down and focus on building one section of my collection before I moved on to modern games. And at the time, the PS4 was still a modern console. I don't think we had even gotten the PS5 yet, when I was going in on the PlayStation 4. And, of course, time passed, and, I eventually had to make a decision between collecting for the PlayStation 4 or the Switch. And so I decided to lean more into the Switch. And then eventually I just had to stop with the Switch and just go all retro. Now, it doesn't mean that I completely walked away from the PlayStation 4 or that I walked away from the Switch. I kind of more so put that phase of my collecting on a shelf. And I kind of told myself, you know what, I will eventually come back to these consoles. Now, at the time, I had gotten a brand new PlayStation 4, but I had also gotten another one from a family member who got me one for Christmas one year. And I guess they didn't realize that I had already had a PlayStation 4, and so they got it for me. And so I decided, you know what, when I was downsizing my PlayStation 4 collection, I decided to sell my open PlayStation 4, the one that I was using to play, really I was playing a lot of games that I could have just played on the Switch, but at the time it just felt more comfortable to play on the PlayStation 4. And so I decided to sell my open PlayStation 4 and then go ahead and keep my brand new sealed PlayStation 4 console. And I still have a good amount of games left in my collection for the PlayStation 4. So I haven't completely abandoned the PlayStation 4 yet at this point. I still do have a good amount of games, like a good handful of games. I would say somewhere between 30 and 40 games for the PlayStation 4. But there's a particular way that I've been collecting for the PlayStation 4, and this is my plan, and this is the big reason why I still have it. So eventually, once I reach my retro collecting goals, once I have kind of all of the titles that I'm really looking for in terms of retro, I do plan to return back to the PlayStation 4 for a couple reasons. One, I think that the PlayStation 4 is probably one of the best value systems that's out there in terms of horsepower for how much you would actually pay for the console. Now, of course, in my case, I already have a sealed, complete console available. But if you're someone who's, looking to get into the PlayStation 4, in some cases, you could get a PlayStation 4 for cheaper than you can get a PlayStation 3, right? Which is kind of wild when you think about it. And, the power that you're getting out of a PlayStation 4 is pretty phenomenal, on top of the fact that you got about 1 terabyte of storage. And there are a ton of really good exclusive titles that you're able to get on the PlayStation 4. Now, for me, when I think of a console like the PlayStation 4, a console where a lot of the AAA titles probably have been released on multiple platforms, including the Switch, the Xbox, and other platforms. When I think about, that aspect of the PlayStation 4, my mind kind of tells me that I really don't want to focus on those big box titles. So when I get back to the PlayStation 4 and when I start collecting for the PlayStation 4 again, I'm really going to be focusing on the kind of more indie, off the beaten path type of titles that you don't typically see, or titles that you probably don't see as much anymore. And some of that is going to be a mix of things, right? Some of it is going to be games that might have only been released through companies like Limited Run. Some of them might be games that did get a general release, but the print run was low, or games that just kind of fell a little bit into obscurity, right? And so I think about titles like Battle Garega, or Berserk and the Band of the Hawk, or Prototype, Biohazard Bundle, or Gravity Rush 2. These are the types of games that I would typically go for when looking at a console like the PlayStation 4, because it makes the most sense to me on this type of platform. Like if I'm going to play a big box AAA game like an Elden Ring, so to speak, or like a Ghost of Tsushima, those might be games that I would want to just play on the best hardware possible, which at this point would be like a PlayStation 5 or a PlayStation 5 Pro. And when you think about it, the PlayStation 4 is pretty much 2 generations old at this point, right? It's almost kind of like, or you could call it a generation and a half. Right now, the PlayStation 4 is basically a generation and a half old, and it's pretty soon going to be falling into the same bucket that like the PS3 was in maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I think at this point, we all pretty much kind of consider, and I think a lot of people have accepted the 7th generation being the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. I feel like those two consoles have finally been inducted into the Retro Hall of Fame, right? Those consoles, I think, are being accepted as, retro, quote unquote. And there's a lot of different opinions on even using the term retro. I did a video the other day where I said I feel like generations should be broken up between what you would consider antique, vintage, and then maybe retro, right? Because to put a PlayStation 3 in the same bucket as like an Atari just seems kind of odd. When you look at the comparison between the technology, they're not even in the same stratosphere. But that's another topic for another day. But going back to the PlayStation 4, when you look at the PlayStation 4, this is eventually going to be a console that not too long from now will be considered retro, right? If we get to the point where we have a PlayStation 6, which we're going to get to that point at some point or another, there's no way that we could continue to consider the PlayStation 4 as a modern console, and it will fall into the realm of retro. Not into the land of obscurity, but it will fall into the realm of retro. And I'm really interested to see how the PlayStation 4, how its lore will play out. Because the PlayStation 1 obviously was the originator. It was the first console from Sony, and it's classic. Like, it's the first, it's classic. The PlayStation 2, of course, is marked by its tremendous improvement in graphics, its monumental library, and to this day, I think it's still touted as the best-selling console of all time. And even though the PlayStation 3 didn't do as well as the PlayStation 2 in terms of sales, it's still marked by its massive improvement in technology. And then, of course, if you're able to get your hands on a backwards compatible PlayStation 3, it adds to the whole lore of the PlayStation 3. I often wonder what the lore around the PlayStation 4 will be when we look at it through the lens of being a retro console. What will be the mark of the PlayStation 4? And will it have like a defining moment, kind of like, or a defining characteristic like how we have with the PlayStations 1 through 3? So it's very interesting to see where this will land. I do think that there will be a valid place for it in any collector's library and any collector's, collection. I think having a PlayStation 4 is still relevant. Like I said, I don't collect for it right now because my focus when it comes to collecting is on other aspects of my collection. But I do look forward to the day when I eventually return back to the PlayStation 4 and start to continue to add some of those really cool niche titles that I was picking up when I was avidly collecting for the PlayStation 4. But let me know what you guys think about this console, about the library. What do you think the lore, or what do you think the defining characteristics of this console will be? I'm interested to know your thoughts, and I'll catch you in the next one. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.